Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, welcome to the third event in the UnFreedom series. This is going to be UnFreedom in Tribal Nations, the politics of food and housing security. In this event, we'll explore food and housing insecurity and sovereignty with a focus on the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation, with a great panel of members of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation and professors from Connecticut College. I'm Bill Garofalo, professor of history in the history department here. And we opened this event with a call to community, and I will turn it over for that to our New London counselor, Kiana Scruggs, who's also a member of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation and a tribal council member.
So Liyak, Intasawis Kiana Morningstar Scruggs, Napiquatu. Welcome. My name is Kiana Morningstar Scruggs. I am Pequot. I'm so glad to see all your faces. I also haven't figured out how to say in Algonquin, which is our language, but I'm also an alum of Conn College. We haven't gotten that far yet, but I am an alum. I graduated in 2002. It's really hard to say, looking at all your young faces, but it's really exciting to be here. We appreciate it. So Katapachush, which is thank you for allowing us to be here. I just want to defer to my colleagues, either one of them. Okay. So we usually start any meeting we have, just want to set the intention, right, of being really open. We want open hearts, open minds, but also a culture of respect. So we do start with a small prayer, if everyone's okay with that. I ask you to remove your hats, if you can, and bow your heads, if you would allow. Okay, Creator, we come to you today just with an open mind and grateful hearts. We are happy to be here with our brothers and sisters from Connecticut College, and we are just excited to have this discussion, this important discussion. We are hoping that everybody comes here just hoping to be a part of a solution and with open and honest opinions. We pray for anyone who is sick and shut in. We appreciate anyone who has had to travel here to be with us today. We also want to acknowledge those who might be attending online via webinar. Thank you, Katapachush, for being here. And we just want to have a really good discussion, and we're excited. And in our language, we say aho.
Aho. Thank you so much for that moving opening. When designing this series, its organizers, history professor Taylor Deloge, who's here with us tonight somewhere. I saw him earlier. There he is, Taylor Deloge up there. Art history professor Ana Valle, who's here as well. Associate Director of Engaged Learning and Community Learning, Luis Rodriguez Torres, who was just here a moment ago up in the back there, you saw, talking about how to sign up. And DE Program Coordinator, Dulmari Irasani, who is right here. We're setting up the technology and so forth, getting ready. When they were designing this event, they asked, right, we asked, are we really free if we lack food and a place to live? Can those of us who live, work, and study in New London find ways to work in community to guarantee adequate food and housing to all? So the organizers that I mentioned to you found support to explore answers to these questions with the panelists today that I'll introduce to you in a moment, and with you, the audience, from sponsors in the departments of art history, anthropology, and history, the Holleran Center, the DEI Division, the Mellon Foundation, the Co-Sponsorship Committee, the Center for the Critical Study of Race and Ethnicity, and Marketing and Communications. Thank you very much to all of those sponsors and to our organizers. Now I'll introduce our panelists and provide 3 guiding questions and moderate as we go along. So our panelists are Counselor Kiana Scruggs, who we just heard from a moment ago, of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. She's also a Connecticut College graduate from 2002, as she mentioned a moment ago, and she's also a council member, the tribal council member. We also have Counselor Jelani Fletcher as well from the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation, one of the tribal leadership. And we have also Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation tribal member Derek L. Strong as well, who is joining us today for this discussion. Among the professors, we have Professor of Sociology, Ron Flores, in the red sweater. We have Professor of Anthropology, Rachel Black, here on the end closest to me. And we have the Director of the Connecticut College Arboretum and New London Trees organization, Maggie Redfern. So the first question, and we talked about in our organizing meetings having Professor Flores answer first, and then Rachel Black, and then Maggie, and then go to Kiana, and then to Councillor Jelani Fletcher, and finally to a tribal member, Derek L. Strong, right, in answer to that. But of course, you guys can vary a little bit as you go along. We'll start with that anyway. So the first question, kind of the broad question is, right, who are each of us as panelists, right? Who are we? And how are we involved in today's topics of food and housing in tribal nations? And I'll just note as they address these questions, Councillor Scruggs and Director Redfern will also help us with land acknowledgements and a little bit about those, and a brief history about the Eastern Pequots, who they are, where they're located, and notable struggles and achievements, so that you also have some background as we're going along. So that first question, right, for each of our panelists is, who are you, right, as panelists, and how are you involved in today's topics of food and tribal nations? Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Ron Flores, and I'm in the sociology department, and it's a great question because I've been involved with Indigenous issues since 1994, 1995, when I first made inroads to connect St. Lawrence University with the Mohawk Tribal Nation, and the experiences that I enjoyed and that my students enjoyed was life transformative, in that I learned a lot about the struggles and the difficulties that Indigenous people face every single day just getting by, but extremely impressed by their complete and utter expectation that they will succeed and they will move forward, and they always do. It's amazing and impressive just how strong they are. When I came to Connecticut College, I had a student named Sonia Rao who wants to know why we didn't have a similar program here at Connecticut College, and I told her that I had no idea. And so she said, well, we should have some sort of relationship with at least one Indigenous nation. And I said, well, okay, can you name one for me? And we'll do that for you, you know. And so, you know, her first response was the Mashantucket, and her second response was Mohegan. I said, I bet you there's probably more. And sure enough, there of course are more, and one of them is the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. And we established the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation Connecticut College Partnership, which Brenda and I co-chaired. Brenda Gear, Vice Chair of Council. Where are you, Brenda?
Right there. She's right there.
Brenda, Vice Chair of Council. And we worked together for many years. I taught a course on the reservation, 424, which was genocide resistance of Indigenous peoples. And in those experiences, the focus of the course, I'm not going to make any claims that I am a Native Studies expert, but I do partake quite a bit on participatory action research programs, and that's what we did. So my experiences with food and my experiences with Indigenous issues stemmed from my experiences both with the Mohawk on a one-to-one level and with the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. Two things that I'll mention. One is the Eastern Pequot are not federally recognized, which is a disgrace. Their case is rock solid, and political issues have completely destroyed the opportunity for a nation to be well recognized and well deserved. And so, but one of the things that occurred as a result of those debates was that the voice of the Eastern Pequot was being outshouted by neighboring factions and state. And so we decided to do a photo voice project in which we allowed the Indigenous people of the Mohawk Nation, of the Eastern Pequot Nation, to tell their stories in their own voice and get that in. And we did a very nice presentation, a TED Talk presentation, but we actually did it as a performance, showing how the photo voice project was able to take images and show the life experiences of the Eastern Pequot. And the second one was dealing directly with food insecurity, and we worked together to plant at least a couple of beds, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 beds of vegetables, and we did that in a way that respected the traditional interests and the traditions of the Eastern Pequot when it came to the kinds of food that we serve. One of the problems with food insecurity is actually the problem of food sovereignty, which is that Indigenous people have a right to eat the foods that are from their own land, which they can't because many of them have been displaced, And so this is an opportunity to at least recognize on the Eastern Pequot Tribal Land, which has been inhabited since time immemorial, to be able to eat the foods that they choose to eat, they want to eat, that tie to their land and tie to their traditions. So that's sort of a little bit of what I've done.
Excellent, thank you so much. Rachel.
Great, thank you, Ron. I'm Rachel Black, and I'm an associate professor of anthropology. And I am specialized in anthropology of food. So I study contemporary peoples and the intersections between food and culture, essentially. And I teach courses here on the anthropology of food, such as food, culture, and climate, worlds of food. And I also teach a course called Power and Inequality. And these are part of both the anthropology degree, but also we have a concentration in food studies in anthropology as well. And then with my colleague, Professor Vukisevich, who I saw earlier in the back, we started a food pathway as part of our integrative curriculum here at the college. And so I've been thinking a lot about issues of food sovereignty, which ties into this panel on UnFreedom, and thinking about food as a basic human right, and these are things that come up in my courses. I've also done research in New London, looking at school food, and I see Myrna back there. When I first met you, I was studying when Brigade came into the New London school system. And then during the pandemic, I did research. The first project was also with my students. During the pandemic, I did research with my students on the resilience of the local food system, looking at small-scale farmers and how they were playing a part in supplying food to people and what role they play in making sure everyone in New London County has food, even in the face of that horrible experience that we all lived through, which was the pandemic, when, I don't know if you recall, supermarket shelves were bare and people were really scared that they weren't going to have enough food. So we did some research on that. So I've been engaged looking at the New London County food system. I haven't had any research experience directly with any of the tribal nations, but I take my students almost every semester to Mashantucket Pequot Museum, and talking about indigenous foodways is really an important part of all my classes.
Thanks, Rachel. My name is Maggie Redfern, and I'm with the Connecticut College Arboretum. Many people think of the Arboretum as trees, and that is definitely one area of our focus. We also steward the 750 acres. We also steward the 750 acres of landscape that surrounds our central campus. And with that stewardship, one of our focus points is the stewardship of the cultural resources that are in the landscape. Through archaeology that took place years ago, with actual digs in the landscape, we have uncovered several indigenous sites within the Arboretum landscape, in addition to the colonial sites that we have that are a little bit more recognizable above the ground. More recently, we've also discovered additional indigenous burials down by the waterfront, and this is primarily through the work of the college archaeologist, Professor Anthony Gresh, who's here. He has worked with the state archaeologists to identify several burials under the lower athletic field here on campus. We also had the opportunity of repatriating an ancestor that was exhumed in the 1980s from our campus lands. These are kind of difficult issues to wrap our head around as a college where we're thinking so much about educating students, but there's tremendous opportunity here for integrating some of these issues within our teaching and learning and research, and opening up this conversation is really important. The introduction of stewarding cultural heritage is the newest piece of the Arboretum mission. That seed was planted in 2015, so this is integral to the work that we do as the Arboretum. Our role within the community is very much providing knowledge about native plants, as well as providing our landscape for the community, for the public to come enjoy being in nature, connecting with nature, and maybe learning a little bit more about the plants that are indigenous to our landscape. A few years ago, we had one of our SALT conferences, which is Smaller American Lawns Today, and the focus for that was native plants and native people, and that was a really well-received program that started to explore some of what we can do in our own home landscapes to connect with native plants, connect with indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge for how to better steward the land that we all live on. So my area is a little bit more looking at the land where we grow food and where we live, as opposed directly to housing and food justice, although they're all interconnected and combined as we think about these important resources and how we make decisions for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me? I'm bad with mics, so just let me know. So I'm who I am, right? I'm Kiana Scruggs. I'm born and raised in New London. So I grew up here, I'm raised here. I was educated here, had the privilege of being educated here. I'm also an Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation member. So I'm a member first, counselor second, but I'm also a couple years ago I decided that I wanted to do more as a member, and so I decided to try and be a part of the change I wanted to see and run for council, and that's why I'm currently on council, which is our government. And just all of these things, you know, just this whole conversation is kind of, I feel, an intersection of who I am. Growing up in New London, you know, in the 80s, right, in the 90s, and then being educated here, and we'll say into the 2000s, so I feel better about my age. But literally, New London looks very different than it did those years ago. So watching gentrification and redlining in real time and seeing the housing prices just continue to increase. People I grew up with and their families that used to live closer to downtown can't afford to now. So when you see that in real time and you live it, it's hard to sit back and not want to help, right? And not want to figure out a way to be a part of a solution, right? And then when you look at food sovereignty, you all mentioned how we all know how the pandemic just exacerbated those gaps that we knew were already there, but I feel like COVID really just kind of made a glaring reality to us that we were missing a lot of things. We as a nation tried to jump in and try to help the greater New London community by giving out food boxes and be a part of that solution, as much for our members as also for our community members, right? We're all family. And so food sovereignty is really near and dear to my heart. I think that when we talk about that, we also have to remember having access to food is great, food resources, benefits, right? But you also need healthy food, right? You need to, why is it so much more to buy something organic than it is to buy a bag of hot Cheetos, right? Let's just, when you look at those gaps, right, we have to really, as a community, decide what it is we're trying to do, what are we trying to solve here, and who are we trying to help? And I think the most important thing, what I love about Con, having the privilege, I'm quite biased, right? I was educated here, and it's my alma mater, but I also love that even when I was here, Con has always been engaged with their greater community. Students have always wanted to help be a part of the solution, and I just am really excited about that. And then when you bring in my tribal family into that, and the tribal part of me, it all is interconnected, and it all works, and you know, yeah, it's exciting stuff, I think. I think before I go any further, though, I think that there was a land acknowledgement that I want to just stop and
Sure.
Maggie, I'll turn it back to you for a minute.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've been asked to read the Arboretum's land acknowledgement. Connecticut College Arboretum honors the Mashantucket Pequot, Western Nahantic, Eastern Pequot, Mohegan, and other tribal nations who are indigenous to Namiag, now called New London, and the land surrounding coastal Algonquin, also known as the Long Island Sound region. We appreciate your careful stewardship of the land over many generations, and acknowledge the suffering endured by your ancestors through the historical period of settler colonialism. Finally, we express gratitude that your tribal nations remain as neighbors in the region and that we continue developing opportunities for greater connection and partnership.
Okay, top touch for that land acknowledgement. I want to bring attention to the fact that when I was educated here, that land acknowledgement didn't exist. And so, is this your phone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I just want to, Maggie, I want to acknowledge that this is your phone.
It is.
And it's super, super important to you. I want to acknowledge the ancestors that maybe have helped you bring this phone forward and how important it is to you. Your careful stewardship of this phone is very important. And I just want to acknowledge to you that I thank you for that.
Sure.
Really do. It's really great.
Cameron, may I have my phone back?
Oh, did you want your phone back?
Well, yeah.
Now, do you think I should give her phone back? I hope everybody Maggie's in on it. Just so you know. I hope that the reason we do that, right? The reason land acknowledgements are amazing. It's an amazing beginning, right? But don't think, if I had taken any one of your phones, would you have wanted your phone back? So I need you to think of land acknowledgements in a very different way, right? It's amazing, and that's not a discredit to Con, right? It's amazing that we have land acknowledgements, but we need to be very specific and intentional about the fact that that's a beginning. It's not a checkbox, it's not an ending, it's not a period to the conversation. Land acknowledgements are a great start, a great beginning to have a conversation about how we can move forward. As someone who was educated here, as someone who paid to go here, on my people's land, it's a very interesting perspective I have, right? And so, and my father, I want to acknowledge him, Willie Scruggs, Dad. My father worked here when I went here. Yes, and the reason I bring that up is my father worked here in physical plant. He was a custodian when he started. He worked all 4 years. He worked here for 27 years. He worked all 4 years that I went here. And I found out after I graduated that he didn't earn a paycheck, because his whole paycheck went to my tuition. So I want to acknowledge him because I stand here because of him. And I appreciate the opportunity to just acknowledge him. I'll never be able to repay him. And I get emotional because I love him so much. But also I just, you guys are all here because you care, right? Or maybe because the professor told you you had to be for class. I remember that. But regardless of the reason you're here. And we want to plant those seeds to start thinking about in other ways, how can I really be engaged, right? How can I really be intentional? Because after you graduate, that's what's important here, right? You want to think about how am I going to impact the world? I'm going to leave the world a better place than I found it. And so we have to be very intentional and very careful that while these, and I don't want to call it performative, but we all know, we've seen some land acknowledgements. Con has 3. So they're ahead of the game. I promise you, there's plenty of institutions who don't even have that and are on several different groups' land. So we do that demonstration just to get you to think about it in a different way, and I am not taking credit for that. I saw it online with a water bottle, but I feel like, a water bottle, let's do a cell phone. I think that's a little more important to people. So we just want to make sure that we said that, and thank you, Maggie. You can have your phone back. See how easy I gave that back? And we're not, and I just want to I want to acknowledge also as Eastern Pequots that we're not here demanding the whole campus, right? That's not, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, though, land acknowledgements are not the period to the story, right? It's the beginning. So just remember that. Thank you for allowing us our little, I think we can be, our little exercise. I think you'll think of it in a different way when you hear a land acknowledgement now and use that. That's a 2-minute demonstration. It works with kids, adults. Please, steal that. But yeah, that's who I am in a nutshell. I'm going to pass it to my colleagues. I don't want to take all the time because I want to have good discussion with all of you who are here. So I'm going to pass it to Jelani, Councilor Fletcher.
I'll be brief.
No, I didn't want to take up too much time, I'm sorry.
No, I like to do the communication with the group anyway. Kuikwa said, let us use Jelani Fletcher. Assume Willis. My name is Jelani Fletcher. Oh, first of all, good evening, hello. Nice to meet you, good to see you. It's beautiful to see such a talent here. My name is Jelani Fletcher. My tribal name is Black Bear. I am from the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. I was recently elected to tribal council last year, so I'm new to the council, but I'm not new to government or new to how our community works, because all of our members are active in the community. All of our members are leaders. We don't always run with titles. That's why we say we're members first, council second. Or prior to this, I was the chairman of the Housing Authority, Housing Committee, fraternal authority. So I'm not new to what our needs are and our tribal needs are. Being I spent many years growing. I grew up on a reservation on the north, and our community is strong. But I've seen the development over the years, of the past 40. I'm not gonna date myself. Over the past,
Listen, I'm already out there. Go ahead.
over my lifespan, and I've dealt with the elders, and we watched them struggle to get us to where we are. We've learned the stories of the past, and we've seen the struggles and the changes over time as we live. And our job now is to just bridge the gap between the interrupted development and our relationship with our ability to be sovereign, to be able to have control of our land and resources, and be able to bridge that gap to where we want to be, in the future and considering now. I've been involved in many environmental justice projects, the farm school program, economic development committee. All of those things are just ways and avenues for us to find to be able to support our nation. But also, community engagement is the main focus that we've been focused on now, because without you all and our allies, we cannot move forward. We can't do it alone. It has to be a community experience. It has to be everyone has to be involved. Everyone has something to contribute to the human experience. So everyone has a part to play in the land, making sure we maintain the land, making sure we maintain the quality of the water, making sure we maintain the quality of the air, because we all share that space. And I think that it's very important to see so many people here. And I pray that you take something from here, or anything you can take from here, and continue that activity in whatever fashion you can. I hope. Oh, also I wanted to take time to thank you, to acknowledge our Vice Chair, Brenda Gear, who came here today. She decided to toss the ball to us. And our cousins over here, Marjorie and our Crow, who came from Mashantucket to support us, my nephew and his wife who came out today, and all of you for participating and hopefully being able to continue this fight with us as allies.
We also have Indonna Spears.
Oh, I didn't even see her.
Oh my God.
And we also have Winnie.
We gotta acknowledge
And
our
Ron,
family.
I just wanted to say too, remember when we did that talk and we honored Trudy? That's Trudy's granddaughter.
Oh,
Wow.
So tell me this is not a full circle. I didn't send you the video the other day, but raise your hand, one hand. That's her granddaughter.
I think with that, we'll take a moment of silence to acknowledge our ancestors, because everyone has ancestors. But that was great. Thank you for tying it all in, Brenda.
Of course.
Kataba Tush Monatu. Thank you, Creator. Thank you, Ron and Lewis, for putting up with me. Let me just start there. I feel very comfortable at Conn College because Ron made it that way. But there was plenty of times he said, I'll see if I can fit you in. We all know how busy Ronald is. Thank you. Gracias, hermano. And that was one of the terms he used when he always greeted me and left me. Thank you, my brother. So that's why I feel comfortable. It's definitely a powerful panel we have here today. I think addressing the issues we're addressing, New London County has been far overdue as far as addressing those issues and tying them all in. Land stewardship, there's a bill currently that allows indigenous people not to have to register to fish without a license. So they wouldn't have to apply for a license. That's important because the ancestral hunting and fishing pathways or foodways take us all back if you're from New London or a coastal community. Can you raise your hand if you like lobster? Blue crabs? Shrimp. We come from a coastal community all the way down to Florida, so we're blessed in that sense. But I believe indigenous communities, no matter the name, clan, tribal nation, we all knew there was sustenance at the coastline. but we also knew, as Maggie Redfern said, there would be trails that would have things to forage. So as we tie it all in with a reservation of 224 acres and other lands that we should steward correctly, I would just say the reciprocal effect of hunting and fishing is everybody's right, but if we do it together in the sense that there's a lot of waste, accountability to the industries that are currently running, and then on top of that, the food that we eat or might waste right here on campus. There's many ways to address, I guess, the issue of food and how we waste it or how we can harness it and how we can be self-sufficient with it. Housing and homelessness, I'm gonna take this moment to honor one of my ancestors. This is from 2006, the New London Times. The title is Invisible and Homeless. I'm gonna tie it all in for you, Brenda. This is my Uncle Ronald, one of the best fishermen ever. No longer with us, he's on his next journey, but from 2006, New London County, have we really been real with ourselves? Now, this is only my chance to speak for him because with a 7th grade education, he had to do what he had to do. But that's what indigenous communities do. I'm not saying Pequot was the best and this, that, and the third, but my father went to Vietnam, so his little brother didn't. So you understand, a warrior is defined in different ways. So I'm up here as a warrior fighting for food sovereignty. You help me define it. Thank you.
I really appreciate those wonderful and heartfelt comments and answers to those first questions. The second question really asks us to think a little bit about concepts and issues, right? How do we each think as panelists, right, about definitions of sovereignty, freedom, and solidarity, right? What does that mean to each of us, right? And related to that, what are the critical issues in our communities today around housing and food? So that's the second question. Maybe we can start with Professor Black, who's work our way down the list.
Ooh, I feel like food sovereignty got put on the table right away, so I was gonna think further about that. And you know, thinking about food, it's something that's part of our everyday lives. It's our sustenance, it's what keeps us going. But it also has symbolic meanings and importance. It's part of our identity, who we are. And a big part of food sovereignty is having access to foods that are culturally appropriate, that are part that you identify with, and not eating things that maybe you find abhorrent or just aren't part of your culture at all. So there's that level of what, you know, the part of self-determination and identity and tradition, but also, of course, the food that we eat, it fuels us. It's what makes us healthy or not. And so I think this is a really big issue here. When we talk about unfreedom, part of it is our freedom to identify and be ourselves, but also to be healthy, to live in a way where we can continue on. And what has to be said too is that, you know, settler colonialism, the colonial experience, was absolutely devastating to Native American populations from the point of disease, but also persistently with the kinds of foods that people had access to, or you know, were provided by the American government when people were displaced. So this is also tied to land access as well, and the use of land. So food access in the Native American context, it's important to think about land access too. So where is food coming from? Having access to traditional hunting grounds, foraging grounds. And I was in a meeting here at Connecticut College last year, and I heard a tribal member talk about how elders couldn't take younger members of that nation to a traditional fishing ground because a railroad went right in front of that waterfront area, and there was no way for them to cross over safely. And so examples like that of, thinking about larger community issues of, land access and food access that go together. So one thing I think it's important to think about as well is that working together as many communities to ensure that everyone has access and the right to healthy, culturally appropriate foods is not thinking that we're going back in time. Of course, there's connections to traditions, but we have to think about solutions that are part of a system that isn't necessarily healthy. And this goes for a lot of populations in New London County who live in an unequal system where there is not always access to healthy foods. And so it's really important to think about how solutions maybe connect to the past, but move us into a present that has a lot of inequality tied into a capitalist system that's meant to profit from people's ill health. So we need to think of a future, push back against that. A future that encompasses the past and the current moment to find creative solutions. One last point I want to say about food sovereignty is the importance of that connection to the past. And so also, how do we learn about our food systems? And I think in most Native American cultures, the importance of elders as the keepers of knowledge and their connection to future generations is critical. And so any ways in which we can encourage oral traditions and connections between the deep knowledge that is kept in many cases by women too, and listen to their stories if they will share them with a broader community. We can all benefit from that. Thank you. Very well said.
I just want to, actually, Rachel has sort of set the stage for me, so I'll be brief. Talking about the circumstances and conditions that actually serve to preclude food and housing sovereignty, and I just give a couple of examples in my experiences of how that worked, and then I want to just share a thought about a piece that I read not too long ago. The author's name eludes me right now, unfortunately, but nevertheless, when I worked with the Mohawk, one of the things that was very devastating was that the Mohawk had traditionally been a fishing community, and if you ever boat down the St. Lawrence River, it's really used to be a raging, wild river, and its rapids were historically known for being incredibly dangerous. It was powerful, to say the least. Now it's pretty much a pond because they basically dredged the bottom, and in great part that was a function of trying to clean it up, but they realized that they couldn't because of the decades and decades of contamination by the Ford company, by the Reynolds company. Aluminum waste is probably the most toxic that you can imagine, made only worse by, for example, the amount of toxicity associated with paper products and paper production, which of course there were at least 2 paper mills located right on the water. So that water, for all intents and purposes, is permanently contaminated, and it took away from the Mohawk a fundamental part of their culture, which was fishing. And just a little bit on the ideas of oral tradition. One of the sort of devastations of that was not just that they couldn't eat their traditional foods, although they still did, especially the traditional Mohawk, who had nothing to do with the Western societies, and they naturally would die. They were going to eat the food, they were going to do that, and they were going to die. But what was also interesting is that fishing was also important because when the children went with their fathers or their parents, it was there that oral traditions were exchanged. It was tradition or custom to share the traditions and the histories while fishing, and that was lost. So there's a lot that's lost just by the contamination that we do to our environment. And so it makes food sovereignty almost impossible. In terms of housing sovereignty, it's okay if the block housing grants are given, the Indian block housing grants are given to perhaps build housing and so on, but it doesn't necessarily account for the fact that the roads may be intolerable and the infrastructure may not be there. And that's usually under the auspices of the United States. So you can build all you want and get those grants, but unless you have access to the infrastructure and unless it works, then you can't possibly, this doesn't make any sense. In terms of speaking and maintaining traditions of your ancestors, you're allowed to have full immersion schools on reservations. And the Mohawk did have immersion schools for language, in Mohawk language, which made a tremendous difference for the younger generations. And there are now at least 2 generations that speak fluent Mohawk. The only problem is that you can do a school from kindergarten to 8th grade where you learn to speak and read and write in Mohawk, but you're not reading and writing in English. So that when you go to high school, you have to go to a U.S. school, you see. And because of that, you have to ask for funding, or you have to ask support for English as second language courses. And of course, the Americans on the other side are saying, how dare you? You're born and raised in this country, not in another country. And so there's this tension and stress. So in more than ways than one, the structures that are placed on top of many indigenous nations prevent sovereignty in various ways, which led me to sort of catch an article that I was reading that talked about the fact that we tend to think of the conquest and the dispossession of Native people as something that belongs to history. And for indigenous peoples, it's something that's happening every single day of their lives right now. And if we think of it that way, we sort of, and as Rachel mentioned, the fact that it's a foundational tie to one's land. Unlike many of us, we're certainly a mobile, moving community of people. We're constantly moving around. But for indigenous peoples, many of their origin stories come from the land. They are from the land. Their land is who they are. As a matter of fact, it makes us rethink, or in this particular piece, make me rethink about the term homelessness, because in essence, for most of us, we think of as homelessness as houselessness. But for indigenous people, homelessness is a loss of their land. And so it's a very powerful way of sort of rethinking things, that these are things that are ongoing today and are continuing today. They're not part of history. They're part of the present. And I'll leave it there.
I'll continue.
So housing and the environment are deeply entwined, and I think one thing that we have to remember is that before the colonists arrived in New London in the mid-1600s, land was not owned. It was community ownership of land, and the indigenous use of the land was shared. It was part of this community. It's no secret, I think we all know that we need more affordable housing in Connecticut, and especially here in New London. And the housing should be clean, it should be sustainable, it should have easy access to public transportation and to good jobs. And weakening environmental regulations won't help us to achieve that goal. Talking about issues such as pollutants and even over-fertilization of monoculture crops on one site affects what happens downstream. It's the fishing downstream is going to be affected by the pollutants or the fertilizers that people are using upstream. And I don't want to be too much of a lawn, dismiss lawns too much. They do have a purpose sometimes. But that is one of the main sources of pollution in our waters, is the excess of nitrogen that people are putting on their lawns. So it's something that we need to start thinking about, is how we treat our land, and try to promote development that protects some of the open spaces that we do have. Here in New London, we're a very developed community, and there's not a lot of open space that's left. So thinking about rehabilitating downtown buildings that are vacant and kind of leading to kind of a loss of community in downtown areas is really something that we should be thinking about. It's important that we safeguard protections for housing as well as for the environment, and as we're thinking about climate change and all that is unknown about the future, how can we be creating a more resilient landscape that provides housing and food for everyone while protecting these limited natural resources that we have. It's sort of daunting to think about, and I guess I'll say more when we get to the next question, because I know that's probably the best time for me to end here.
So right, yeah. I'm going to pass this off to my colleagues because I don't that they have a lot to share, and I think that she'll just pass that around.
Food sovereignty. If you'll follow me, we're up against big business, right? So being a New London, New York native, anybody here familiar with a fish run? Where the fish are jumping out the water and everybody's pulling up and they don't even have to ask for bait. This is how I connect with my audiences. I'm gonna take you to the past real quick and then we're gonna speed it up. I promise I won't take too long. So with General Dynamics right across the river, the Thames River, which is actually the Pequot River.
Say that one more time.
But we'll go ahead and talk about that later. If you look at that as an ancestral hunting and fishing ground, food pathway, whatever we want to call it, in the 1980s, bluefish and striped bass would jump out the water chasing the menhaden, the butterfish, and other bait fish. I tell that story because it's integral to my life story, but at the same time, yes, this gentleman right here was right there. As homeless as he was, he didn't care, because he knew at that time of the summer this is where to be. So I was about 9 years old. I recognized then that we were blessed, privileged to live in New London. Second largest whaling city in the world at one time. So if we embrace this coastal community and remember Maine and New Hampshire, they love doing clam bakes and all these things. That's a cultural exchange. So a lot of times people from all different walks of life were fishing right next to each other. That got broken down. So that's what I'm here to fight for as well, because it's not just my ancestral fish pathway. No, we all remember that. I have some great friends from all walks of life that now they have to go on a charter boat, or they have to compete with somebody who's spearfishing. So it's the haves and have-nots constantly when you look around. And I'm not saying we don't have anything. We're blessed to be right here. Just allow us to access certain places that the Department of Transportation take over that are real good crabbing spots that were set up way before colonialism. Why? Because our people put rocks in a certain location at low tide. So therefore the fish and the crabs would be there when we needed to go get them. So the sharing of knowledge is community. It's not about a geographical location. Yes, I love being from this place, but don't get it twisted. I share knowledge and they share it with me, because if I'm lost, I know how to survive. So I think that's what sovereignty is. It's us sharing the knowledge of how we create a Venn diagram, look at each other, how we can blend, how we can bring skills to the table that we can share. No one gardens to have a zero outcome. They'll talk about it though. Oh man, I didn't get no good tomatoes this season. But if we share the knowledge, the Farmer's Almanac, we open it up, go back to what Grandma said. I just want to refer to that maternal wisdom you had referred to earlier. Yes, maternal wisdom ultimately makes the world go round, because that's the love. But that's the only way to really grow something. You nurture it, just like the relationship that Ron and Brenda formed years ago. Brenda, I apologize for skipping out on those classes, but just the name alone has me here today. Genocidal resistance and how it ties into the sovereignty. So I would say I take a stance on the solidarity side of how we can partner with a Haven's Harvest to allow Conn College's food department to be the hero, to allow a residential, a women's shelter, after-school program to receive the food you students aren't okay with, you're done with, and after that, they do their community commitment and donate some food. So that's more of a partnership than Eastern Pequot running around with the flag, look what we did. But that partnership is 5 years going now.
5 years.
So this was several emails, this is every person we could contact, but we knew to reach out to New Haven. Haven's Harvest is a hero, Lori Martin. She was able to formulate that relationship because New Haven addresses real life issues. New London County, unfortunately, we draw a blind eye to the big corporations, the submarines passing down the river. And I'm not mad about that because it definitely gives us a definition of who we are. But I'll use this one example. When the Coast Guard was inquiring, with the local chatter about what to refer to the river as, they did the hero thing. They said we're going to recognize it under its many names over the many years that this river has always been here. So it's not to get caught up in politics, it's to recognize the power of the river. There's only one Coast Guard Academy. It's right here. It's for a reason. They're only launching subs from here in Virginia. It's for a reason. So New England, or let's just say Massachusetts Bay Colony and Virginia Colony, Virginia Bay Colony, those are the big colonies back in the day, but who's in the middle? New London. So this little town has a lot of rich history, but I believe the solidarity in the whaling community and even sharing that knowledge and sharing those rations and food sources is what we need to get back to. The haves and the have-nots will not prevail because, unfortunately, we're seeing it play out in real time. And we can go on and on about food deserts. I personally asked for Maggie Redfern to be here today because I love the Arboretum. So tilling the soil for our people, working the land for our people, is why I'm up here looking for solidarity in sovereignty and fighting for the mental health of our people. The maternal wisdom that comes from growing something, taking care of something, watering a plant. Thank you.
You gotta preach up here.
Don't get me started. All right. Yeah, I believe this all ties into our cultural understanding, but it's also not just unique to our people. Many cultures and faiths have this same understanding of our relationship and our obligation to the Creator, or given to us by the Creator, in the sense of stewardship, or we call it vicegerence. Second, where God placed us in charge of the land, the stewardship concept, where we have obligations and responsibilities to the Creator. In this order, to ourselves, to our family, to our community, to the land, to the animals, to the air, to the world at large. And so when you put those things in perspective, you have to realize there's a symbiotic relationship that has to be maintained, and the only way to do that is to maintain the health of each and every one of those. And when we live in a society today which is full steam ahead capitalistic, where it consistently seeks to withdraw and never seeks to put back or restore or create balance, then we see what we're left with. And so the energy that we have here today, and with the cooperation, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking, collaboration with many of the community organizations that we work with, it's all about restoring that balance and creating that an environment and keeping the conversation going and keeping that momentum going so that we can create more solutions to the problems that we all face. But we may have the sources of ancient knowledge. We also have the sources of new and creative solutions that can be created by other people who will observe and learn other ways to contribute to helping us solve these problems. And the only way to do that is if we all come together and to take opportunities like these and use this to create more momentum, to create more opportunities. When we talk about what was the other freedom? We have freedom too.
Right.
We always think about the freedom to do things. What about the freedom from? We should have the freedom from the encumberment of being able to have healthy homes and healthy environments. We should have the ability to have freedom from being dictated how to cultivate our own lands and how we should be able to have access to the land necessary that was taken from us. The land that was taken from us that we needed because we've been placed in lands that produce nothing. Rocky, shallow lands and things of that nature, so that we were displaced, not only displaced, we were also forced into diaspora to assimilate and forced into a system that is completely antithetical to who we are. And so now that creates this what you see now, us trying to fight back for that, but at the same time, it creates that confusion, you know, in ourselves and our identity. So as we strive to reconnect with our past knowledge and create a new future, we realize it's going to take a partnership. And I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you in creating that partnership. I hope.
I'm just going to add two things because I think it's really important. Everybody has spoken about the fact that I know growing up myself, if I didn't have the teachings from my mother, my grandmother, to know that I was Pequot, to know that I was Native, to know that I'm still here, right? To read in a book that the Pequots used to be here. And I was like, but I'm here. Like, I'm reading the book. That's a very interesting, when you think about it in that way, right? People think that we don't exist anymore. We are still here fighting every day, and that's why we participate in these type of conversations to remind people we never left, right? We've been here since the 1670s. Right? We were here. We weren't discovered. We won't get into that. We was here. Hello. But anyway, just remembering that, right? This is a current topic. This is a current conversation. We are not the past. We are still here fighting. There's something you can do, right? One small pebble makes a ripple. Never think that you can't do good or affect change, because if everybody thought like that, where would we be? So just remember that. I don't want to take too much time, so please.
It's perfect. And those are really great words, talking about solidarity and getting people to think what they can do. That is really actually the third and final question that we'd like to put to the panel before we turn to the audience and ask them what they can do. And that third question is on action in working in community, right? What can each person or organization do? What can we do in solidarity? And again, we'll start with Professor Black, and anybody can chime in as they go along.
Wow. Yeah, it's been so generative listening to everyone on this panel that I wanted to respond to, I've been thinking a lot about what does unfreedom mean. I think that we need to talk about that for a second. I was thinking how we think we are free because we have choices. But then we look at those choices and we go, well, they're all not good. That's not having choice. And that's what I think is at the core of this discussion too. Realizing that you can push back and say, no, I'm not okay with these choices. This is not my freedom. This is not what I want. So I think there's, something to be said about that. And, as others have said on the panel, this is largely a product of capitalism too, that says, but capitalism and a very broken notion of democracy. I'm sorry, I'm going to go there because it would be criminal not to. So we live within broken systems, not just broken systems about healthy, fair food or access to housing, but the whole gosh darn thing is broken. From what I'm hearing, I totally agree with you. We need to think about stewardship. We need to think about solidarity. But the word that didn't come up here is governance. We have, a governance issue, and I think, we can, the federal, the state, the county government can learn a lot by looking at tribal nations and their systems. But I think that everyone needs to look at our current systems of governance and say, no, this is not okay. It's not okay for capitalist billionaires to buy an election, to buy what you can. And it's time to just say, no, this is not okay, and not be polite anymore. That we have capitalism not just driving our non-choices, I will call them, bad choices that we get to choose from, but also saying, oh, we're going to be efficient and we're going to create systems that's going to be good for everyone. No, they're not. They're good for very few people. So I think we need to call out the extractive nature of capitalism that's not only within our housing, within our food, but within these systems of governments that are supposed to protect the environment, when we see the EPA being gutted once again. There's not going to be anything left. And it's great to sit on this panel and say, you know, I'm not going to give you any lesson on Native American food systems. You know, that's, you know, not for me to be giving the lesson on. But what I can say is, in my own work, I've tried to see how food is a way to look at other realities beyond just identity, but you know, what makes us human. And what I can see looking at food is that we need to take action and we need to change. These issues are too important. If we're gonna have healthy food, good food for everyone that makes sense, if we're gonna have housing for everyone, we need to push back on the structural issues. And Ron, you were right on that at the beginning. These are structural issues. It's not enough to, some of my students say, well, I'm gonna vote with my fork. I said, no, vote with your vote. Get out there, protest, scream, yell, kick and scream. Because this is not going well for anyone. So I really want people to think about, if stewardship, solidarity, and freedom are important, we need to draw into question and push back against a system of governance that is absolutely broken.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on what Rachel said again, but I'll take it on a very, very personal level, and that's what goes on here in our college and in our communities. I had spent my career when I discovered something called service learning, which now is known more as community-based learning and teaching. And the crux of it is that we can't simply just get up every day and go from one classroom to another, to another, to another, and think that we're getting a real education. That's a bunch of bullshit. And write that down. What you really learn is the way that I experienced learning when I first started doing this work. I know more than I probably ever could have known by simply having conversations with Brenda, with Derek, and with other members of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. I learned more than I ever would have learned by spending time with the Mohawk Nation. And I brought my students with me. We need to do more of that. We don't do as much of it as we should. We don't have a lot of classes. We don't have a lot of programs that actually get us out into the community, having conversations, learning about the situations. You got to be there first. You got to taste it. You got to experience it. You got to know it before you can actually then address the things that Rachel's been talking about. And that's what they're woven together. So if you talk to your professors and tell them, just like Sonia Rao told me, Ron, why aren't we teaching the course where we work on the reservations? And we did that. And it was transformative for me and transformative for the number of students who did that. So keep that in mind as you think about your education and the way you can make connections to your community, all the communities that are out there. And I'll let that stop there.
Thank you. I think Rachel brought up a really important point. It's not just the corporations, but it's politicians and those in power who are making a lot of really important decisions that don't necessarily involve the residents and the citizens of these communities. And one thing that I have found is that working together, open conversations, open dialogue, working with other community groups is how we will build strength and be able to make change within our communities. On Friday afternoon, I had the pleasure of walking around the Arboretum with John Harris from the Mohegan tribe, and I was talking with him about some of the local issues here in New London that I won't get into right now. But he said, well, wouldn't it be great if everyone thought like we do? 13 generations forward, 13 generations back. And I thought that was such such an important thing, and that's, when we plant a tree, we're planting that tree maybe not for 13 generations forward, but in a way it could be 13 generations forward. We plant a tree today to give us the shade in 20 years, the nuts in 30, 50, 100 years, and then those nuts will create trees for the future. And all too often, those in power are thinking about the quick dollars that they're going to be making as opposed to what's actually good for the environment and what's good for our land and what's good for the long-term health of our people. And I think standing up to the plutocracy, that was the word I learned, that's what we actually have now is the plutocracy. That's the rich rule. The rich rule. To stand up to that, I think our voices need to come together. We need to work together. We need to work in community to make our voices heard and to let those that are making decisions for all of us, just to make our voices heard and let them know that, as Rachel said, it's not okay.
So true. So I just want to share a brief quote that I use a lot because it reminds me when things get hard. It's by Brian Solis, and it's, "Community is much more than belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes belonging matter." And I think that's a really powerful statement, right? It's one thing to be a part of a community, but how do I feel a part, right? How do I feel belonging, that sense of connection? I think Rachel just talked about how food can be connection. I think that that's something as humans we have, when we think about it in that way, like, I know that my family, and I'm talking about my immediate family, my tribal family, my con family, like, we connected over food, right? If you're studying for a test, or there's gonna be some food involved most likely. Late night runs to the, I don't know if it's still there. Is the Crow's Nest still there? I'm old, really dating myself now, but Crozier Williams, there's something there that sells food, right? Late night, not right now, but there was. That's right, there's a little deal I forgot. A little bit of an issue. Ooh, so sorry. No, but just thinking about it from that way, there's so many ways to connect and so many ways to be a part of your community. There's so many, and even if this is just your community for right now, right? Maybe you're here for a couple of years and you're gonna go back to your own home community, but you can take these lessons, you can take this knowledge, and that's what we're hoping for, right? We hope that everybody here represents a group of people, right? You're gonna go back and share with your crew, your family, your clan, whatever you call it. And that's how we continue to make those ripples. I think part of that, though, I think that conversation piece is so important, engaging with our communities, right? I think we have to do more of that, right? Because you need to hear from us and we need to hear from you, right? People wanna help, they don't always know how to help. So I think that's an important dialogue, and I wanna just offer up, because I've been out of the loop a bit, but I don't know, we'll talk more, I'm sure. I'm hoping this is not the last conversation of this kind. Maybe not in this forum, but maybe in a different way. I'm happy to try and come to someone's class and talk if they want. I do work a regular job because I still have bills. So while I do volunteer our services as a counselor, I have a regular 40-hour week job. But because we do what we have to do in the fight, in la lucha, right? But I do think those type of things, having conversations, figuring out how we can connect, and action plans, right? It's good to have this conversation, but we need to develop actual steps, right? Because sometimes we'll talk about it, and it sounds really great, and everybody's all excited, and then next week, you've got an exam, or you've got a paper, or some things going on, and I very much get that you guys are also balancing quite a bit. So there's small steps, right? We're not asking for a lot, but one small step can be just such a huge thing. And so just remember that when it doesn't have to be big, right? Big is good, but it can also be small. And that still affects change, and it's still a good help. So never think that something is too small and minute. We have some cards up here. If anyone wants to reach out, our emails are on there. Please feel free to reach out to us. We want to continue this dialogue, and we want to continue this connection, this partnership, right? Con's all about connections. I know it's a big thing right now. So yeah, let's remember that. I'll pass it on to my colleagues, so I'll take up all the time.
Everybody having a lot of good points, and I think what we're really doing is reiterating what we already know, or reaffirming these things. that community engagement is extremely important. When we talk about politicians and holding corporations and things of that nature, one of the things that I find most effective is working on a local level, community engagement. Because if we start with the youth, those are the people who obviously want to be the future leaders. But if we start with the communities and the people in the population that's there, these are the people who elect the politicians.
Absolutely.
So the more community engagement and education and involvement and cooperation with the communities, then we can create an atmosphere that allows us to be able to hold them to account. And then while at the same time working with youth, we create a new generation of people who will keep that momentum but actually spread and create new possible solutions to make sure that we never fall back into those systems again. I think that's the highest level of interaction that we can have. Instead of going to the corporations and politicians, like most of the time, that's what most people have done. And that's an old model. You know, that old model has not worked for us, it's failed us. The politicians are going to represent those people who line their pockets, the people who keep their pockets lined the most. But if we go to you can go to your, as a constituent, you can go to your politicians, that you elect and hold them to account. And you can withdraw your dollars from these corporations that keep on extracting from us and not giving us anything back. They don't care about your health. They don't care about your jobs. They don't care about your wealth. They don't care. And so by doing that, this level of interaction, and you guys are taking the same level of engagement and moving forward, that's the most effective way we can affect change. Thank you.
I kind of want to make a joke, but I'm not joking. So the first person to give you the maternal wisdom, obviously, is your grandmother. She's your first girlfriend, whether you like it or not, because sometimes you get on your mother's nerves. But here's my point. She's the first one to tell you, nothing change unless you get up and wash up, right? So nothing's going to change with the current situation we're in. So we all have an obligation to what? Mother Earth, Father Sky, in all my relations. So the winged brothers that might pass on and I'm able to celebrate, give an offering, perform, and then make into a nice piece of regalia for my daughter so she can adorn it and represent that winged brother. That's carrying on ceremony. So the simpleness of gutting a fish, is that ceremony? Of course it is. Because I need to take these inner city youth that don't know anything about that part of the ceremony and probably don't want any part of it, but it's still a part of it, that we have these fish intestines that we'll use for fertilizer. So the reciprocal effect is still there. There were certain fish that were known as throwaway fish. You didn't want to eat those fish, but you used them to make the produce come up quicker. Just the sharing of knowledge, I think that's what you could do when you leave here, see yourself in a child, share this with them, not like we drop diamonds and gems on you, but you can illuminate what we gave you. The light we gave you, Kwiki-san, you are in the light, so share that light. And I think in solidarity, go home to your homes and recognize the land that you're on is probably the most peaceful part when you go outside. Because you're boxed in. So I bring it full circle and say, let's be innovative and think outside of that box. Workforce development, hempcrete, different building materials that won't invasively kill our environment and say, hey, look at us, we're building so quickly. EB has all the apartments they need. I'm sorry, we're not addressing the real issues here. The workforce development could easily put 5,000 people to work, but then there's a contingency on the back end of the contract that some of them get housing as well. So there's different ways to negotiate the world we live in, but if we currently keep going or going with the flow, we're really going to just end up downstream, and you know what flows downstream, right? Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Derek Strong, and thank you to all of the panelists. Now, in our last 15 minutes, we open the circle to the audience. I already see there's an enthusiastic audience member, right? And the panelist wants to know what you guys are doing on these issues or what you can do on these issues, right? So Luis will help with the microphone. We got one question there, and then Brenda here in front. Just put your hand up and we'll find you for the next one in line.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I'll tell you what drew me to it is the combination of the food and the housing, because too often what I see is that we choose as a society a topic such as housing, and we go on it, it's like the flavor of the day, of the week, or of the month, whatever it happens to be of the year. And we go for it in isolation of our broader community needs. And so, I mean, in New London, we have a situation where housing is taking away community garden, one instance, you know. I don't know, I mean, I know a number of partners here with Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust, but for those of you who might not know what a community land trust is, we take land off of the speculative market, and in our case, Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust, it's for 4 main reasons. It's affordable housing, it's growing food, it's green spaces, and it's also community spaces. And I wonder about this, how much people know, or if that's a consideration for one up. I don't believe in like one magic fix, but one little piece of a solution to this issue, the broader issue of community and land. I love Mrs. Scruggs, like the action, but also the quote that you gave of doing something together. I wrote pieces down to see if I can find it a little later, but
Sure.
I love that about that's how to be in community. And I think that being a part of a community land trust, like yes, there are the broader issues and the broad values, and it also depends on membership, and so of that community coming together to be a part of it. So I am a part of it. Leo here has been a part of it. Grace over there. I don't know how to say your last name. Lukitsevich? I wanted to say professor, but and so anyway, the community that brings something like that, taking land off of the speculative market and having our broad values.
Can I
Yeah,
speak to that real quickly?
Mike?
Let me speak to that really quickly. I'm glad you mentioned some of the things you mentioned in the report. In the state of Connecticut, the majority of the land space is single home residential. And it's very exclusive. And you gotta remember that since first contact nations are northeastern and well, basically East Coast nations, they're the most highly industrialized, highly built, and then solidified. You got old, that's what you call the old money and all. It's very restrictive and very hard to get, excuse me, get into those type of projects where you can get affordable housing, or because the towns have zone laws and things that have been in place for a long time. We've been battling against that for quite some time. In fact, my vice chair and I'm going to let her speak about that when she gets a chance. We're going tomorrow to speak with the lieutenant governor and testify on behalf of a bill that we proposed for such a project for our tribe, all the tribes in Connecticut. But these things are also not just restricted to just us. We are looking to create, to impact affordable housing for all the communities that have been affected in Connecticut, and low-income minorities, but not just that, students, food, all these things, like you said before, I want to link that to that, are all linked together. So it's hard for me to isolate one issue because it correlates with another, and it's collaborative, but it takes that collaborative effort. But to understand the background of the how and the what, then you get to the the where, the why, then you get to the what and the how. And so I'm glad there's so many people like yourself looking at those different creative solutions that we can all figure out how to be able to fight against that type of mentality and create a new paradigm so that we can move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Fletcher. Can you guys hear me? There we go. First of all, can I just get a hand for the panel and the professors that put this very important conversation. As a community, there's unity in community. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times, but it's very true. We can make a difference if we come together. We can't do it on our own. Eastern Pequot isn't going to do it, but we can certainly be part of the effort, and that's why we're here. That's why we've been asked to sit on this panel. We've had a long collaboration with Con, something that I'm very proud of. And it continues, and hopefully it'll continue for a long time. But there are a lot of forces that are against us, no doubt, especially as being a native in Connecticut. Before I got here, I had a meeting this afternoon with the Lieutenant Governor, and just trying to find resources for my people. And when I say my people, I'm not talking about just Eastern Pequot. I'm talking about natives in Connecticut. Because there's 3 state tribes, that really don't have access to a lot of things, such as housing and healthcare, education, so on and so forth. And our people are dying because of it. We are in a crisis, is what we are. This is why these types of conversations are so important, because we can make a difference. And as Native people and as stewards of this land that we're actually sitting on right now, you know, take it from the natives. We've been here. We've been stewarding this land. We know how to do it. And what I have said to so many people is if we lived like the natives lived, we wouldn't be in the position we're in right now. Which is very true. I'm not saying that just to, you know, say natives are, you know, the all answer, because that's not what I'm saying. Let us teach you. Let us be part of that conversation at that table. Because we're at the point, we're in crisis mode, and I know we can make a difference, but we gotta do it together. We can't do it on our own. And with the Lieutenant Governor, even some of this conversation I had with her, to let her know the situation that our people are living in, and the conditions of our homes, including myself. We don't have access to certain things. And you think, oh, there's 2 federal tribes. Yes, but even they have housing issues.
Absolutely.
So when this bill was submitted, it was submitted to help all 5 tribes. Because just because, you know, Massachusetts, and I know that they're here, and I love them, and my cousins were directly related. Just because they have a casino, everybody thinks they're multi-billionaires, you know, and they can solve the world's problems. That's not the case. They have housing issues themselves. So food and housing goes hand in hand. If you don't have one, really, it's hard to have the other. So, but like I said, if we all stick together and continue this conversation, we can make a difference. And I even said that with the Lieutenant Governor. Matter of fact, I suggested to her something that has never happened before, which is why can't we annually get together with the legislators and the 5 tribes? Let's get to know each other.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you know any history, but the state of Connecticut was not a friend of natives, and they still aren't. They're still fighting us. So, you know, it's a long, hateful story, but through me being the vice chair, my goal is to repair that friendship, that relationship, because that's the way it has to be. You can't do anything that happened in the past, but they can help us move forward, to help us with some housing, and so that we're not dealing with food insecurities and so on and so forth. We're people too. We're here first. And, you know, if I have to go up every week to the Capitol and remind them of that, then that's exactly what I'm going to do, because I love my people. And that's exactly why I'm here today. This is exactly why you have Eastern Pequots on that table up there. Because we do care, and we will lead the effort if we have to, but we will make a difference.
Oh.
Thank you so much. Great job. The Butterflies, my organization is Partners in Healthy Communities, but I'm also with CHIO, Narrative Change. So it's time for a new story. There was a really good article in Columbia Magazine 2 weeks ago by Roseanne Haggerty, I believe her name is, How to End Homelessness. And it starts with tiny houses, public health, substance abuse prevention, and job training. Several years ago, when Eunice Waller and Milton Cook passed away, for those of you who don't know, Eunice Waller, her husband, was the first black professor at the Coast Guard Academy. And when Martin Luther King was assassinated, she and her husband donated $100 to the MLK Scholarship, which a few months ago gave $20,000 scholarships, I believe, this year. When she passed away, we did a big fundraiser called Food is Medicine for the soup kitchen. in Milton Cook's name here at Connecticut College. Connecticut College comped the dining room, the chef donated her time, all the food was donated, all organic, local food, and every single penny went directly to the soup kitchen. So I would like to do another fundraiser in about 6 weeks, about Easter time would be good, for you as well. And finally, there is an organization, if you Google Food is Medicine, the Rockefeller Foundation is the #1 hit, and I'm sure that they would be happy to help with finances of this. And this is all about allies and bringing people together and building community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those kind words. I just want to echo the sense of community around food. Breaking bread is the oldest form of teamwork. So if you think about it that way, a lot of the cultural exchanges that you spoke of, it's ways to give people flowers, honor them, and celebrate one another over a good meal. That's also the maternal wisdom. I'm going to bring that back again, because who do we get some of the best recipes from? Great-grandma. And these things are not by happenstance. They come with alignment to you accepting that the masculine and feminine rule you, but also move you forward. Now, if I have toxic masculinity, I'm telling Ron, I'm not showing up to that place. But if I know how to balance it out, I'm tapping back into the maternal wisdom that I'm supposed to be here, finding a solution with you all. So it's not about me, it's just, I know I've came a long way, but I think in solidarity of where we go from here, thinking about food and thinking about the waste, carbon footprint, all these different things that we could do effectively together, maybe a zero waste policy campus-wide, things like that. We can compost, we can do whatever we want, because effectively the movers and the shakers are on the lawns of the collegiate universities nationwide, right? Most times that's where a lot of you all meet, you exchange ideas, and next thing you know, you're owning a company, and I'm trying to get a job. But it's all right, because if you know how to give back, there has to be a give back component. Like I talked about before, the reciprocal knowledge of, if I didn't have a geographical location or a tribe to call my own, I still knew how to get from here to Mashpee. I still knew what to eat. I still knew where to fish. I still knew how to introduce myself so I didn't be perceived as a threat. But we're all strangers until we walk in this room. As soon as you sit down, you know why you're here. And I think Councilor Scruggs and Councilor Fletcher said it best, because we care. That's why we're all here. So innovation, most thriving businesses have an innovative department. They have a whole team set up on what's our next move. So why not, as a human race, are we not looking into how to be innovative with this current situation, this current crisis we're in? It's not a situation anymore. And I would just want to say that Conn College is definitely blazing a trail with the way they've taken the waste, deep freeze it, and next thing you know, it's into New London community. That didn't take one conversation, that took several conversations, but it was because we all seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Now with other ways and means of empowerment and forming freedom or unfreedom, I think it's a ball of clay that's left up to you all to take from here tonight. That's all I can really say. I have daughters, I have twins that are 20, I have a 14-year-old, so just know I speak to them the same way. Thank you.
Any last questions?
This will be our last question, and of course I'm going to invite everybody to think about providing us with some feedback. Also keep in mind that there are sign-up sheets if we just want to know how many people were here, but also you can give us contact information if you want to get involved, right? During what's called solidarity, that's the time to do it. So if you haven't already signed up on one of those, please find them towards the end of the day. Go ahead with your question, please.
I can't even tell you what it takes for me to speak like this, but see the gentleman in the red hat sort of gave me a gateway. I'm a volunteer at the New London Community Meal Center, which they used to refer to as the soup kitchen in London. And I hear about community. I was here last week for the housing crisis talks, but I never hear anything about volunteering. And years ago, we had volunteers from Connecticut College every week, sometimes 2 days a week, coming to the soup kitchen and helping. Now, almost every person in the soup kitchen as a volunteer has the same color hair as I do. And we're all getting to the point where we're not going to be able to volunteer much longer. So anybody that can pass the word or come and volunteer with us, we would love to have you. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank our wonderful organizers, our wonderful panelists, our stupendous audience, all of the sponsors of this event. Please join us again March 29th in the afternoon for the mini conference here at Connecticut College. We'll be looking at New London history. As Louise pointed out, there's a call here for students and local historians to get involved. So if you want to do a flash presentation on current or ongoing research, you can get involved. Again, thank you so much. Please help yourself to more refreshments, come and talk, and join us for the next event. Thank you.